I will arise and go now, and go to Innis free, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made, and I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. I will arise and go now, for always, night and day, I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, while I stand on the roadway or on the pavement grey. I hear it in the deep heart's core.
My name is John Connolly. I'm a member of Galway City Council. I'm also a teacher by profession. The role of a councillor in Galway is part-time. In Ireland it's part-time, so I teach as well. I'm originally from Galway. I'm originally from the city. My parents are both from the city. You know, I generally have an interest in the waterways as well, possibly because of my heritage in the city. They're a defining characteristic. They're a defining characteristic of the natural environment. I suppose they're a defining characteristic of the built environment with the canals as well. I think all Galwegians would have a fondness for the water system and for the canals and for the rivers. You know, I have to be honest, sometimes when I'm walking through them I kind of picture myself in a Walter Mackin short story or a Walter Mackin novel, because they're very prevalent in his books, and it's just an affinity with it, and it's a pride in it, and I think we need to mind it and we need to preserve it and we need to develop them further. And you know, they're a legacy of our ancestors, and they left them in good condition, so we must give them to the next generation in similar good condition.
Well, I guess when I first got here, fear, because you looked down and it was so murky, you didn't know how deep it was. You didn't realize if you fell in, you could stand up. I live here in Galway and I teach at the University of Ireland, Galway. Teach literature, Irish literature in particular. And I came here 23 years ago from America. I'm an American by birth, and I lived and grew up in the Midwest, outside Milwaukee and outside Chicago in the suburbs. I came to Ireland because of my studies. I did a master's looking at Irish literature and how it kind of related to African American literature. And I knew I wanted to go out and do a PhD. And you know, I was warned before I came that Galway is either seen as the graveyard of academia, promising academics go there and never leave, or the graveyard of ambition and same kind of thing. You know, it has such a great vibrancy that it just kind of sucks people in. Memories when I first got here is, you know, shopping carts and, you know, cones, and it was kind of a bin, a liquor bin. But at the same time, in the spring, you see the swans and the cygnets. Any spray, you count the number of cygnets. Was it more than last year, less than last year? So it's also this kind of reminder of this kind of inner beauty, this kind of hidden beauty that's there as well. I know people who love canoeing out in the canals and you know, kind of playing water polo or canoe polo. out there. It's fun to see how it's been part of, kind of life and living and activity. I'm from the town, I was born here, raised here, went to school here, went to this university. And the older I'm getting, the longer I've been around, and the more, I have to tell people I have 50 years of clear memories of stuff I've seen and remember, of, like when Kennedy was here in 63, I was a small boy, but I remember the day when the cathedral was opened, and people think it's hundreds of years, but it's very new. I studied civil engineering, that's what I worked at over all the years. And for the last couple of years, I've always been fascinated by the history of the town, knowing there was a medieval history. And that really wasn't a part of our local history, wasn't really taught at school very much. So I immersed myself into that. I'm also very interested in traditional Irish music, and they overlap quite well, history, heritage.
Hello, I'm Jim Higgins. Jim O'Higgin is my name on my passport. My slave name is Higgins. So, Jim O'Higgin, I'm the Heritage Officer for Galway City. I also am involved in the conservation of built heritage. I was always interested in history as well as archaeology, and I suppose I got that interest from my grandparents and my parents. And I suppose you can't be around Galway without seeing historical structures and wondering what they're about and so on. And so the interest in, I suppose, the historical, that branched out to an interest in the physical, the environment, the archaeology, the architecture, and so on.
We have a passion for our town, for our heritage. And when you look at it, was a town of 7 rivers, so they're small little rivers, many of them built over now. See little tributaries just collecting in, but they're underground. So the waterways were a major reason why the city of the town originally was founded here. Because the sea, back in the late 13th century, when the Anglo-Normans came here, they had recognised the business opportunity to import wine from Spain. Galway then became the 3rd port in the British Isles: London, Bristol and Galway. So there was a very strong medieval town here, very welcome merchants.
Well, there were plans for canals going back to the 16th century in Galway. There was a plan to link Lough Atalia, which was a saltwater lake, to the Corrib, the River Corrib and Lough Corrib. A lot of the transport in prehistory was up Galway Bay and down through the river and the lake.
It was part of the defence system as well, because before motorised boats, you had the sea protecting the town on one side, and you had the very powerful river all the way up to the Corrib. So the waterways are an intrinsic part of why the town is here, why people are here. And in the 19th century, you had over 20 mills that we know of on the stretch of a mile up the Corrib here. So it employed most of the people in the town.
By the mid-19th century, 1850s and 60s, you had steamers operating on the Corrib, on the lake and on the river. Then by the late 19th century, you had a drive to bring the canal right through alongside the city. It went to one side of the medieval city, and that became the Eglinton Canal. The use of the Corrib was much greater then. You had an awful lot more boats using it. In a way, the use of the canals has decreased over the years. It's now more or less they're a leisure resource rather than a working resource. And this is partly because in the 1950s, some of the locks on the canal, those were turned into permanent concrete bridges. In the past, you would have had a massive amount of goods being transported from the lake, from up, say for instance from Annadown, from Con, places like that, all the way from the Lough Corrib to the River Corrib, to the Galway River or to the canal and out to the bay. Now most of the people that use the canal would be canoeists or walkers or people who fish in the canal.
Well, I suppose if we are going to encourage people to come to Galway and to view our waterways, to walk along them, to learn of the history of them, to learn of the ecosystems, the natural biodiversity of the waterways, we should have them looking well. We don't want to attract people to Galway. I don't want this for Galway natives either, to come to our city, say, look, we've got this lovely resource, but we're not caring for it. So I think that was part of the motivation of saying that if we're going to develop that project, part of the resources should go on, I suppose, the clean-up of the canal system. Now, in fairness, I would have to say that call was heard, and they are working with, in fact, I must commend, I think it might be the kayak club who worked with the local authority in cleaning up the canal system.
Yeah, my name is Lucien. I'm part of NUIG Kayak Club for a good 8 years now. And so the club gets people from the college on the water, on the canal, down the river, and then we do trips all around Ireland as well, and sometimes abroad.
Hi, my name is Arthur. I've also been in the university around here, and I've been in the club for about 9 years. Yeah, as Lucian said, we're all about fun on the water and some extreme sports on the side of it.
It's important for us to even show that we're cleaning and taking care of the places where we paddle, and even for people to understand when we clean up why it's important to keep that trash at home or in the bins and not just throw them in the river. Once a week, you can definitely see how much trash there is. And if you go along the canals, you'd see a lot of cans stuck in the reeds. Even if you walk in Galway, you'll see the canals, and then you'll see at night some people that shouldn't throw their trash in the water, but that do. And you definitely, like, the more time you spend on the water, the more you recognize the problem and see.
The problem of litter, people would say, oh, it's the schoolboys from the beach, passing the canal, throwing litter. And you say, well, are they throwing any more litter into the canal than they are onto the street? Well, are there enough bins? Are the bins going to be emptied? Sometimes it's out of a herd mentality, You're going to throw litter in because it's seen as the cool thing to do or the disrespectful thing to do or whatever. And this is against the background of generations. Every year, every school kid is told not to litter or whatever. No matter what environmental policy there is there, no matter what feelings are generated in school kids about not littering or whatever, you're going to have that problem. Would guys coming out of school throw litter in if they were able to eat in the canteen at school? Or do they want to go uptown, for instance, because they want to break from the school at lunchtime? All the fast food joints are on the route. Some of them are along by the canal. Do the fast food places take any responsibility for the litter that somebody else who has bought the material are throwing into the canal? Some people will say the pubs. You see a big foam on the canal, for instance, and you say to yourself, well, somebody's been cleaning the kegs or cleaning the taps in the pub, or somebody has been emptying their grease trap into the river. You literally have to catch people at it. You have to have a litter warden, or you have to get people at it to be able to prove that is the case.
I don't know who is responsible for littering our canals, and I'm not making judgment on anyone who is. The only, I suppose, partial judgment I will make is I do see the connection between the byproducts of alcohol and the consumption of alcohol. There has been a massive change in Ireland in alcohol consumption since I was a child. When I was a child, really, my parents, if they wanted to consume alcohol or enjoy the consumption of alcohol, they went to a pub. Now I would say that a greater number of people buy their alcohol and off license and consume it outside of the pub. So obviously that generates litter. Obviously in the licensed premises, all the litter was maintained there. And maybe that's part of it, but certainly I've noted that change in society, and I've noted as well, like, you know, the off license was something that was associated with a pub in years gone by. So, but now, like, every supermarket has an off license, every petrol station has an off license. So there's a much wider availability of alcohol outside of the licensed premises, and maybe that's contributed. Again, you know, there's probably some research on that some way, but anecdotally, I'd have to say it maybe has.
I wouldn't have thought about it very much, but he's right. To what degree it influences, I'm not sure. But certainly along the canals and with all the good weather, you know, and during the lockdown, maybe when pubs these were closed, lots of people congregated, bought 10 cans of beers and everything else, and they chucked them. And that goes back to the basic respect. Say, I would imagine when my father was watching me back when I was a boy, and he saw me throwing in something into the canal, you know, I can guarantee you every other time after that, I'd bring my bag and bring the cans over to the trash, right? Yeah, I suppose just the cans and the bottles, and the fact that Galway is a young person's town, but you know what I'm saying, that it's a party town, so there's a lot of that. And the canals are everywhere. I suppose in general, there's much more pollution, you know, anywhere. So from when we were kids, I mean, bear in mind that when I was a school-going boy, right, that electricity was just been rolling over around Ireland, okay? We were a very new state. I mean, we're just a republic since 1949, less than 10 years or to the make. So it was a very different place, and there wasn't the damage, the environmental damage. So my impression would be just a bubbling water and happy places, you know, clean places. Back in those days, the vast majority of people in Ireland worked in small farms, right? So they were in touch with nature, in touch with animals, and had respect for nature, fish. Water was very important. Water wasn't something that came from the system. You know, water was something that came from a well that you minded on your land. So there was a lot of respect in the past for nature, that people lost that connection, perhaps. And I think that's part of what's happening now, trying to reconnect with, you know, people with it. I would believe that every schoolboy child should learn something about singing and music. It's not just optional, you go this route or that. Environmental issues and nature should be just part of everybody's, you know, a basic skill sets that you get, and educate a generation, but then that's in the system. Their families would pick up on all of that. So yeah, it's a wide-ranging approach, but to get the respect in people, into individual people themselves. It's not because you break rules or because you break laws. We're never going to have a policeman at every canal to pick up somebody that throws in a bottle. But if you can get the mindset first, I'm not throwing something into that because that water is precious, well, then
in a way, back then it was about aesthetics, really. Litter's bad, and we could all kind of agree with that. But there wasn't really kind of a connection to thinking about living and how it's kind of part of your lives and central, which I think has changed lately. Like, looking at my children now, you know, they kind of understand how, you know, living in the West, that they're consumers, and the choices they make, you know, aren't just about what tastes nice, but it's about how is that good for the field down the road or the farmer down the road. And I guess, you know, and then those 30, 40 years since I grew up, we kind of developed the idea of how we approach the environment, where we move beyond aesthetics to kind of seeing a much more deeper link and interconnectedness, if you will.
Well, I think the entire environmental political movement in Ireland has its source in primary schools. There was an initiative in Ireland in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, called the Green Schools Initiative, or the Green Flag Initiative for primary schools. And that had a massive impact on young people. As well as that, in 1999 there was a new primary school curriculum introduced with a heavy emphasis on environmental well-being across many of the different curricular areas: geography, science, SPHE, social and personal health education. So the environment became a real active issue in classrooms from that point on. I'd be frank enough to say, it's through teaching about these issues I did become aware of them. In my previous school, I was involved in the Green Schools initiative, and I worked to make sure that the school was awarded the green flag on the different themes, litter being the first one, energy, water conservation. And in my current school, I have to say I work fortunately with fantastic staff, and their interest in the well-being of the environment is very prevalent. We recently undertook a project in our school under the what was known as the Creative Schools Ireland project. And when we started the project, we really didn't know how it would turn out. But as it evolved, our creativity turned to the school grounds and to the school garden. And we planted in the region of 300 native Irish trees. We've got all the pupils planting different vegetables, fruits, and it's a constant theme now in education, the well-being of the environment. And we use our own facility and our own site in school to promote it, to teach in the outdoors. And again, I suppose, coming from an area where there is a high level of, natural environmental features such as rivers, mountains, waters, it's a great opportunity to, do cross-curricular work when you select a subject like the environment. So it's had a big influence on my outlook on environmental issues.
My name is Michelle O'Dowd-Lohan. I work as the Sustainability Officer at NUI Galway. This is a relatively new role in the university. I took up the position in September 2019. I'm working in conjunction with our Community University Sustainability Partnership team. Together we drive forward the sustainability vision in the university. Sustainability means lots of different things to different people. You have everything from sustainability of government finances, energy in terms of sustainability, food sustainability. Simply put, it's the ability of something to sustain itself. And by sustaining itself, that means to preserve or maintain itself into the future. And that's very much our vision here in NUI Galway. What do we need to do as a campus community? NUI Galway was founded back in 1845, at the height of the Great Irish Famine. So what do we need to do now to ensure that we maintain this institution long-term into the future? Our overall approach to sustainability here in the university from day one back in 2015 is to drive forward what we call a learn, live, lead model for sustainability. And really what that means is that we want to embed learning about sustainability into all aspects of our teaching and learning. So everyone that comes to campus at NUI Galway, they learn about sustainability. But then aligned to that, we want to set the campus up that we live more sustainably in everything that we do. The food that we eat, the energy we use, how we manage our waste, how we promote health and well-being. And I suppose the idea is because we're learning about it and we're living it, that should position us then to be role models and leaders in terms of translating that sustainability agenda beyond the campus walls and into our local communities, such that when our graduates leave the university, they become the role models and the leaders for sustainability, both themselves and also the communities that they serve.
Student unions and clubs have made more use of the canal, which you want to keep it cleaner, and there's consciousness of that. And of course, in the last decades, in the youth, there's a movement towards kind of health that wasn't there in mind. I've seen kind of communities coming together every now and again and trying to clean it up as it goes down towards Rushing Dove and Claddagh there. But in fact, most of the kind of cleanup efforts that I've seen, in Ireland, not just in Galway, are kind of community-based, whether it's kind of neighbourhood or my sons are in the Scouts, and so they go down to the beach and with bags and clean up the beach.
Yeah, Galway's always, like the canals in Galway have always been very important, and I think we're very lucky that there's a lot of infrastructure just right beside the river. Here we've got our club, there's the rowing club there, there's the diving club, there's the Galway Kayak Club across the river. So a lot of people have direct access to the river, and that just to be able to enjoy the flat water, the moving water, is just very helpful. And I think over the last 20 years, a lot of people from Galway have tried to make the most use of everything around them. And like the Spot 01 More is a tidal feature, so it's making use of tides that fill up a pool that creates gradients and creates a wave. and then make use of like drainage ditches or
Yeah,
even like little rivers, canals, and like the tides everywhere, just to try to get on the water as much as possible. So it's really making the most use of what we have around us, and just showing to the whole community that we're there and that it's not only us that should take care of it, but everyone.
Quite a bit of a increase in people maintaining the canal a little bit better. The club has been doing cleanups every year since, which actually it wasn't that uncommon that we do cleanups, but it has definitely increased in the amount of times we coming out and picking up a couple of things.
You know, other groups have been involved as well.
Yeah, so even the clubs around us, like Galway Kayaking Club, have helped us out a lot with the local cleanups and stuff. So.
I've been in office since 2019, okay, so it's reasonably recent. Now, I was previously a councillor as well, but I was out of politics for about a decade. And I have noted in that time how the environment is much higher on the agenda. And every issue now that is pursued, there's always an assessment made of the impact on the environment. And I was thinking of coming up here today, I was thinking about the development of the Eglinton canals in Galway in the mid-19th century, and how nobody had any idea then of the loss of habitat that might have occurred with the development of the canals. But every project now has to have an assessment of its impact on the environment. Now that can be frustrating for some people because it slows projects down, but I think it's important. And I think we're far more aware now of biodiversity, ecosystems, and the need to protect them. As I said, I think that people feel in the need for infrastructure that there might be now an imbalance in terms of there's a greater importance now in the preservation of the environment rather than the need for necessary infrastructure, what people see as necessary infrastructure. So I just think it's important that people realise the processes that are there, and that we are obliged now under European legislation, which we've adopted nationally, to protect national habitats and to offer greater protection maybe to environmental features that previously people would not have had the same sense of importance about.
Well, I think if I'm being honest, if you were interested in environmental stuff or sustainability 20 years ago, you were considered nearly a bit radical. You were an environmentalist, and that was something that was kind of radical. That was money. And we had an absolutely wonderful lecturer, Dr. Streamer Colleran, and I suppose her vision was to be a good environmentalist, you needed to be balanced. And that really appealed to me, that you could be an environmentalist and you could be balanced. But for me, the change in terminology has been really important. That term sustainability wasn't that widely used, because before it was the environmentalists on one side and the developers on the other. But what sustainability has done is it's brought in three pillars: environment, society, and economy. So for something to be sustainable, those three pillars need to be strong. And when one of those pillars are weak, then nothing is sustainable. So, it might be a very simple way to look at it, but in times of war, society breaks down, so the other two pillars are going to crash down. If the environmental pillar comes crashing down, then society and economy will too. And I think that kind of thinking, I don't know, has it brought more people on, but certainly at a governance level and leadership level in the university, it's how do you have the three aligned so that you can't just decide things because of the environment. You need to consider what impact it's going to have on society and economy as well. And maybe that more balanced approach kind of, has developed the campus to where we are today.
Well, I think our government are very aware of them now. I'm sure you'd be aware that one of the government parties in Ireland now is the Green Party. And it seems to me like that the government have really adapted the stance of the Green Party on many environmental issues. And again, that has caused friction. We've seen recently whereby one minister suggested that we could no longer sell turf in Ireland. And I believe they're progressing to the implementation of that. That's a seismic shift in Irish society, particularly in Irish rural society, and the people have rallied against that. So they have. And I think this is where we need to be cautious, because if we don't have the people on side, we're going to find it increasingly difficult to make the type of changes we need to preserve the environment and to offset the challenge of climate change. Recently in Galway there was a suggestion or a proposal to take out parking in a particular part of the city, a scenic part of the city in Salt Hill, and develop a cycleway. And that was opposed for many different reasons. My reason for opposing it was that it was also going to have it was going to cause serious impediment for the local public transport system. And you see, I think when we're making changes for the well-being of the environment, we have to assess if the change is not actually going to have the environmental impact we hope. Because if we impede the public transport system, more people are going to rely on their cars. For me, a lot of this is striking the balance and getting it right. And I think what we need to do first and foremost, where we can, is look at maybe where we can make small changes that people can see the benefit of and people can support. And from there, develop it from there to making bigger changes. I'd much prefer to kind of be cooperative, collaborative, to engage people, to help people to see the benefit of making sure that we maintain these places well, and trying to as well, and the challenge for me is not always in the community, but sometimes it's around the council chamber, sometimes it's the officials who hold a lot of, I suppose, what you might call the operational power in local government. So it's trying to engage with them, trying to help them to see the benefit if we can make these slight changes, and a benefit that will probably extend beyond just the city citizens, to encourage more people to come to Galway and enjoy it.
I suppose it's like everything. There's the state funding way of doing things, there's volunteerism, and there's corporate sponsorship for doing things. But everything, like waterways, is regulated in our laws. So we wanted to do stuff. We found that you can very easily find that some officer properly comes out and says, excuse me, you can't do that, you're disturbing, say, the bed, or you're disturbing the fish at a certain time of the year. So it needs to be structured. And one thing that we thought is that it needed an overarching body. So one body would look after boating, another would look after all within their own regulatory environment. But in the meantime, the whole waterways agenda wasn't being put forward. And the waterways, you have the canal, but you also have the river and the lake, and they're very significant features on the landscape in the west of Ireland.
Yeah, but I think we're looking for an assessment of the water quality in the Corrup. It'll be the Environmental Protection Agency. Navigation, well, there was a body set up to manage navigation on the Corrup called the Corrup Navigation Trustees. They've kind of extended their remit further under their own, I suppose, their own interest in the well-being of the water. Obviously, the local authority would be responsible for the maintenance of the banks where they own the land, and otherwise it's in the ownership or it's in the responsibility of a private owner. But it's just unclear at times, and it just could do with clarification. And I think, personally, I would like to see the full responsibility fall on the local authority. But I suppose it's a relatively small country, Ireland, so the bodies like the Environmental Protection Agency, they do a good job in trying to make sure that the water quality is good.
As a university community, we recognise that our students can learn about sustainability in 3 ways. So through the formal curriculum itself, so when students come to campus, the courses they choose, how can we build sustainability in there? But they also can learn about sustainability through the co-curriculum. And what I mean by that is give them the opportunity to volunteer, to join sustainability themed clubs and societies, to meet like-minded individuals, to provide toolkits and resources as a university to help them make that transition. But we also see the hidden curriculum as being really key. So students learn about sustainability just by the way that we do things. So we've a biodiversity trail in the campus grounds, trying to encourage students to get out there, spend time in nature. It's good for their mental health and well-being, but it's also good to learn about biodiversity on the campus. You know, if you go into a shop and you buy stuff, you might be asked, do you want a bag? And then there's a levy on that bag. Or you might go into a building and there's a screen in the building that shows how much energy that building uses or how much water that building uses. So it's not just those students who choose sustainability themed courses to learn about sustainability, that everyone has an opportunity to learn about sustainability regardless of the course that you choose. I suppose the key point I want to make about students, Mia, that they have been absolutely the leaders for sustainability in our university. So if we look at the breakdown of our campus, we have 20,000 people on campus. Nearly 18,000 of those are students. So student voice is absolutely key in the transition to a more sustainable campus. Absolutely. If you do not have students on board, we're not going anywhere. Obviously you need leadership for sustainability at the highest level, but we also need that bottom-up approach, student voice, action, activism. But students have done more on our campus over the last 5 years than any other cohort to drive forward the sustainability agenda.
And it has changed, it has improved over the last decade. I was trying to think about, comparing attitudes to the environment here versus back home. And in a way, I think Ireland was always about a decade behind, where when I first got here, people still, young people would throw their crisp bags, and they just drop them as they're walking in the street. Thankfully in the States that had passed as being kind of appropriate on any level. But, we've passed that here too, where things are a little bit better. Back in the States, my sense is that concern for the environment is a very privileged position in space, where if you have the means, you can raise that agenda up on your kind of life choices. But if you're kind of struggling, if you're on the margins, well then, the lowest cost products and the lowest efforts is what's necessary to kind of live and kind of make a life in that sense. You go to the farmer market here in Galway and you can get produce very cheaply, cheaper than in the shop, in the supermarkets. If you go to this farmer's market or the Whole Foods back in the States, you're paying a premium. So I guess in a way, you almost say, concern for the environment becomes that luxury that it isn't necessarily here. Here it's more egalitarian, it's more available. Ireland, because it's such a small place, you can't hide from the environment. In a positive way, just the beauty all around you. I live out in the countryside, surrounded by fields and cows, and a kind of rock wall just on the other side of my house. Horses just at the bottom of my drive, and then I can jump in the car. And in 10 minutes, I can be at the sea. So in that respect, you're just connected to the environment so much.
Rubbish, clash, refuse. 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 rubbish,
Out, out, out,
trash,
out, out, out.
refuse, rubbish, trash, 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 refuse,
A kiss. A wish. You're now welcome to join and make a wish, a kiss, a blessing. Whoever wants to come forward.
I was delighted to receive the correspondence from Professor Timothy Bernard, and I set about developing a plan for what I would contribute to the time I would spend with students in Galway as they continued the Eglinton project. I decided to create a collaborative performance, canal, which formed a ritual healing of the canal and rivers. The performance took place beside the Eglinton Canal on the edge of the Children's Millennium Play Park. I dressed in a business suit with white plastic forks attached by glue and wearing a mask of the river gods, which is used in stone carvings on bridges and above doors, and also a halo with the name Nave Aun, which translates as Saint River. Having reached the centre and the trash can lid, I released the binding on the twigs, held the twigs above the lid, and dropping them, they hit the lid and spread outward. From the falling twigs, 2 were chosen and weaved into a cross, symbolising a blessing, and offered to the canal. 2 more twigs were chosen and weaved into an X shape, symbolising a kiss, and also offered to the canal again. 2 further twigs were selected and were weaved into a Celtic knot shape, similar to a cross symbolising a wish, and offered to the canal. The collaborators, having made their own symbolic crosses, etc., came forward and placed them at the centre, making their own invocations. As in certain rituals, dance is incorporated, and I invited the collaborators to join. Everyone partnered or otherwise danced to the sounds, and the performance finished with the song. My time spent with Tim, the students and volunteers in the kayak club was incredibly rewarding. They The level of enthusiasm and interest in the environment I witnessed bodes well for our planet. The welcome and friendship shown during such a glorious time in Galway will stay with me forever.